In a few days, I'm leaving for my first ever camping festival. I'll be DJing at High Vibe Fest near Big Bear in California, and the whole thing feels almost unreal.
Welcome to the dark side.
The theme of the festival this year is Elevate Your Artistry, and I'll be performing on Elevate stage, bringing my elevated bass music there. Like, how surreal is that? When organizer reached out to me, I couldn't believe how aligned it felt. They only found me about a week before the festival, and they said they really wanted me to perform my elevated bass music on their Elevate stage, and of course I couldn't say no. If you've seen some of my YouTube videos, you already know that Elevated Bass Music is my new project where I combine immersive bass music with healing instruments like crystal singing bowls, Tibetan bowls, tuning forks, ocean drums, and other sound healing tools, while also incorporating scratching into my DJ sets. So of course, I'm bringing some singing bowls with me. Not all of them, that would be absolutely insane. Setting up my entire collection on a small festival stage would probably take longer than my actual set. But I am bringing a few bowls that I use most often because they've become such an important part of my performances. So I'm packing everything up and getting ready for the adventure. It's about a 5-hour drive, probably closer to 6 with charging stops. And first, I'm going to spend the night in Big Bear and then head to festival grounds the next day. It's a lot of firsts this time, because it's not just the first festival in the States where I'm DJing at, but also it's my first time ever camping. So I'm excited, I'm nervous, stressed out, and I'm sure it's gonna be lots of fun though, so I'm gonna take you guys on the journey. I think we are finally ready to hit the road. Of course, Ellie is coming with me. She's already traveled to several countries with me, so it only felt right to bring her along for this adventure too. And just like that, we are on the road. One thing I got completely wrong before this trip was how long the drive would actually take. I was convinced it was going to be around 5 or even 6 hours with charging stops, but as it turns out, the drive was actually much shorter than I expected, so the trip felt surprisingly easy. Before I knew it, I was already approaching one of my favorite stops on the way to California, Peggy's Youth Diner. It's one of those places that feels like a time capsule from a completely different era. The entire diner is themed around the 1950s, with vintage decorations, old signs, jukeboxes, movie memorabilia, and of course, lots of Elvis Presley everywhere. There are Elvis figures, photos, posters, and references throughout the diner. And to be honest, every corner has something interesting to look at. I don't usually stop here for the food. I stop here for the atmosphere. There is also a gift shop filled with all kinds of nostalgic souvenirs, and outside there is a small lake with ducks, turtles, fish, and walking paths. After sitting in the car for a while, it's the perfect place to stretch my legs before continuing the drive. I always end up doing a few laps at this park. It's peaceful, beautiful, and somehow it has become part of my California road trip tradition. So whenever I'm passing through this area, I almost always stop here. A little while later, I'm finally arriving in Big Bear. This is actually my second time visiting, but I forgot just how beautiful it is here. The scenery is completely different from Las Vegas. There are mountains everywhere, huge pine trees, fresh air, and of course, the lake. The first thing I needed to do was charge the car, and one of the nice things about driving a Tesla is that charging stops kind of force you to slow down for a moment instead of constantly rushing somewhere. So while the car was charging, I grabbed a quick snack and walked over to the lake. And I wasn't in a hurry to leave. The views were beautiful, The weather was perfect, and it felt like a nice transition between everyday life and festival mode. After that, I headed to my hotel. Well, technically it's probably more of a motel than a hotel, but it was right by the lake and the views were absolutely gorgeous. That evening was exactly what I needed. No crowds, no schedules, no stress, just a quiet evening by the lake before the festival. Alright, today is the day! Time to get ready. I dried my hair, got dressed, had some breakfast, did my makeup, packed up the room, loaded everything back into the car, and finally headed toward the festival. And now it was officially happening. The festival grounds were only about 30 minutes away from where I was staying, and the first stop was the box office to pick up my credentials. And look, somehow my wristbands ended up matching my nails almost perfectly. As soon as I got inside, I went looking for food. Because no matter how exciting a festival is, I'm always significantly happier when I've eaten. After grabbing something to eat, I started exploring the grounds. I checked out the main stage first and spent some time walking around before heading over to the Elevate stage, where I'd be performing later that night. When I got to the Elevate stage, it was actually still closed and covered from the heat, but thankfully they still let me do a quick sound check. The setup was different from what I normally play on, and the equipment wasn't what I had requested in my rider. I had never played on this particular controller before, so having even 10 minutes to familiarize myself with everything made a huge difference. There were a lot of small things that worked differently from what I'm used to, but by the end of the sound check, I felt much more comfortable. And now all I had to do was wait for the girls to arrive and figure out this whole camping situation. A little while later, the girls finally arrived, and thankfully, Oля came prepared. She is an experienced camper and was kind enough to bring us a tent and help us get everything set up. Neither Julia nor I had any idea what we were doing. This was my first time camping, so we were incredibly grateful to have Ola there to guide us through the process. Honestly, setting up the tent ended up being much easier than I expected, at least with 3 people. What I still don't understand is how Olia manages to do this by herself. So we got the tent up, inflated the mattress, organized our things, and just like that, we officially became campers, at least temporarily. Once camp was set up, we finally had time to explore. And this is where I really started to understand why people love festivals like this. Everywhere you looked, there was something happening. There were artists selling handmade jewelry, clothing, paintings, crystals, instruments, and all kinds of unique creations. There were workshops, performances, art installations, and people expressing themselves in so many different ways. It felt incredibly creative and welcoming. The whole festival had a very different energy from the larger commercial festivals I've attended before. It felt more personal, more connected, more like a community. Of course, I kept finding myself coming back to the Elevate stage, and partly because it still hadn't fully sunk in. In just a few hours, I'd be standing on that stage, sharing elevated bass music with a completely new audience. And every time I looked at it, I got a little more excited. As the afternoon went on, we continued exploring, watched some performances, met some people, and eventually stopped for ceremonial cacao. And then it was time to head back to camp, because it was time to transform me from exhausted camper into festival performer. The girls helped me with my hair, and I got dressed, but as soon as sun went down, the temperature dropped so fast. California had decided to become winter overnight. Since campfires weren't allowed, we pulled out our little camping stove and made some tea. We were trying to warm up before heading back to the stage, because the closer it got to my set time, the colder it became.
Here we go. Eliza is super cold.
I'm freezing.
but ready.
By the time we headed back to the festival, I was absolutely freezing. And when I say freezing, I mean my teeth were literally chattering. I couldn't stop it. Before the set, we stopped by the green room. There was snacks, drinks, and a place for artists to hang out before their performances. And before I knew it, there were only about 10 minutes left before my set. I checked in with the sound engineer one more time, and once everything was ready, there wasn't really anything left to do except walk up there and start. And suddenly, after months of building this project, I was standing on the Elevate stage at my very first festival in the States.
You will come.
And to be honest, the set flew by. There were definitely a few things that didn't go exactly according to plan. At one point, one of the tracks on my USB wouldn't load. But thankfully, I was able to adjust and keep going. I'm sure no one in the audience had no idea anything even happened. The biggest challenge of the entire set wasn't the equipment though. It was the cold. By that point, my hands were completely frozen. And if you're a DJ, especially if you scratch, you know how important your hands are. At one point during the set, I actually grabbed the microphone and told everyone that my fingers were so cold I could barely move them, and that scratching was becoming really difficult. And then something really beautiful happened. The entire crowd started reaching their hands toward the stage and making these warming up motions, almost like they were trying to send me their energy. Everyone was laughing, smiling, and collectively trying to warm me up. And it worked. Within seconds, I went from focusing on how cold I was to feeling completely supported by the people in front of me. It became one of my favorite moments of the entire weekend. And when the set was over, I was overwhelmed by the response. So many people came up to talk to me afterward. One person told me they had never seen anyone combine singing bowls, scratching, and bass music before. Another person told me how much they enjoyed the experience and how different it felt from anything else they had seen at the festival. One of the compliments that meant the most to me came from the sound engineer. He told me that my set was his favorite of the entire weekend. And considering he had listened to every artist performing over those 2 days, that meant a lot. I also started getting messages on Instagram from people who had seen the performance and wanted to follow my work. So despite the cold, despite the technical hiccups, despite all the stress leading up to it, I walked away feeling incredibly grateful. Because this project that started only about half a year ago was clearly resonating with people. After the set, we went back to the tent to put on even more layers. And then we headed back out to explore more the festival and check out some of the other performers. Even though I was freezing, I was having such a great time. The festival itself was beautiful. The people were wonderful, the music was great, and there was such a strong sense of community everywhere you went. So despite the cold, I wanted to experience as much of it as possible.
So it's 4 a.m. and I'm just sitting here in the car eating some popcorn because I'm also hungry and warming up. Insane. It was also super loud up until 4 a.m. And finally it's not loud anymore. I can sleep, but I can't because I'm cold. listening to the recorded audio from last night, and my heart is so full. It was such a great time, and I'm so happy with my set. And I still didn't sleep.
When the sun came up, everything immediately felt better. The temperature started warming up, the festival grounds came back to life, and suddenly the freezing cold night felt a little less dramatic. At least until the next night. But we'll get to that later. For now, it was time to explore. One thing I really loved about High Vibe Fest was that it wasn't just about music. Throughout the day, there were workshops, yoga classes, meditation sessions, all kinds of activities happening around the festival. It felt like there was always something interesting to discover. So we spent most of the day just wandering around and exploring. We checked out more vendors, walked through the forest, watched performances, grabbed food, met people, and just enjoyed being there. Every corner seemed to have its own little world. There were so many talented artists and creators everywhere, and so many things that you simply don't see in everyday life. We also spent a lot of time checking out performances across all 3 stages. Every artist brought something unique, and it wasn't just DJs. There were live performances, musicians, interactive experiences, and all kinds of creative expressions happening throughout the weekend. The days were amazing. For me, the problem started every time the sun disappeared, because as soon as it got dark, it got cold. Again, very cold. And then I found myself right back in the car, trying to warm up, trying to sleep, and once again eating popcorn. And to be honest, sleeping in the car wasn't exactly comfortable. But compared to how cold I was in the tent, it felt pretty good. By the 3rd day, we had somehow adapted. Not physically, we were still cold, but mentally. We knew what to expect. And despite all of the challenges, we were really glad we decided to stay. Because there were still artists we wanted to see, workshops we wanted to experience, and more of the festival we wanted to enjoy. In fact, some of my favorite performances happened on the final day. 2 of my favorite sets from the entire festival were Avatara and Ruby Chase. Both performances were absolutely incredible. And if we had left early, I would have missed them. So even though part of me wanted to run back to a hidden hotel room somewhere, I'm really glad we stayed until the end. Some experiences are worth being a little uncomfortable for. Before we knew it, it was already time to pack everything up. We took the tent down, packed the sleeping bags, loaded the car one more time, and somehow managed to fit everything back inside. Before leaving, we took one last walk around the festival grounds, one last deep breath of that fresh mountain air, and then it was finally time to head home with a full memory card, a full car, and a very full heart. Looking back, this weekend challenged me in so many different ways. The biggest challenge definitely wasn't my performance, it was the cold. I don't think I've ever been so cold while trying to function. There were moments when I genuinely questioned all of my life choices at 2 or 4 o'clock in the morning. But somehow, those moments are also part of what made this experience so memorable. Because not every adventure is comfortable, and not every great memory starts with comfort. We also learned something very important about ourselves. I think it's safe to say that camping isn't really our thing. At least not this kind of camping. We definitely discovered that we're a little more on the luxury side of traveling. Give us a cozy hotel, a hot shower, and a warm bed, and we'll be very happy. So after this camping trip, I feel like I need another vacation just to recover from the vacation. But if you asked me whether I would do it all over again, the answer would absolutely be yes. Because this weekend wasn't really about camping. It was about something much bigger. It was about playing my very first festival in the States with elevated bass music. And that's a moment I'll never forget. What's even crazier is that this entire project is only about 6 months old. 6 months ago, elevated bass music was just an idea that honestly felt a little crazy. I wasn't sure if people would understand it. I wasn't sure if combining bass music, scratching, and healing instruments would resonate with anyone. But little by little, people started connecting with it. And now, only 6 months later, it's already bringing me to festivals. It's introducing me to incredible people. It's opening doors that I never imagined would open this quickly. And I feel like this is only the beginning. I'm so excited to see where this journey takes me next. And thank you so much for being here and following along. Whether you've been here from the very beginning or you just found this channel recently, thank you for being part of this journey. I have a feeling we are just getting started. I'll see you in the next adventure.